Back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to bring in and continue on from the last segment where we previewed tonight's game between the Cowboys and the New York Giants. And now I wanted to kind of build on that and bring in the other matchup that intrigued me this week, talking about the Bengals also playing at the Carolina Panthers in this Week 4 matchup. These two games certainly have my attention because of the ever so famous what if scenarios of potentially seeing the Dallas Cowboys or the Cincinnati Bengals lose again, and what that would mean for them and their seasons going forward, right? Because I think these are the two most criticized teams right now so far because people expect them to obviously be better than their record show, right? One's 0-3, still needing to find a win, and the other one is 1-2 and hasn't played very well at all. Both of them haven't played particularly great football yet. And, the thing about the Bengals was that, they start the season off pretty badly. That's just who they are. They're going to get it eventually. Well, if they start 0-4, now it kind of shifts the energy around everything, right? Around the organization, around how people view this team, because it's not only just that the Bengals start bad, it's that the fact that you're pretty much about a quarter through the season and you still haven't found a win. That's basically a month now gone where you've now have to chase wins rather than having them saved up in your back pocket in case you need them later on when you play these divisional games in which the game could go either way, basically, right? And if you start 0-4, it basically means that almost impossible, I would think, for any team to make the playoffs starting 0-4. I'm almost certain that's never happened before. So we're right there at the cusp with the Cincinnati Bengals. And likewise for the Cowboys. At 1-2 right now, yeah, they've gotten a win, but it's really been blown out of proportion because of their run defense, basically. It hasn't been great at all, or NFL level at all for that means. They've just been too easy to kind of get hold of, be taken advantage of in these scenarios where teams just go out there and feel like they can walk all over them. And yeah, it might be a case where it happens once and you're just like, all right, let's just forget that like it never happened. But then it happens again. And now it's getting to a point where, all right, like as men, as professional athletes, you have to come to a point where you're thinking, like, this just can't happen. Anything else can happen. Any quarterback can throw for 300 yards on us, 4 touchdowns through the air, but we're not going to get beaten up and stomped on every game by the opposing team just walking in back-to-back home games where teams have just walked in there, just moved them back against their will and just imposed their will all over them. So that's where we are with the Cowboys and the Bengals, two teams that I think at the start of the year in the offseason, while there was some turbulation with the contracts, right, with Jamar, with CeeDee Lamb, with Dak Prescott and all that, T. Higgins also, if you want to throw him in there, there was all that talk, but still, people expected these two teams, probably more so the Bengals than the Cowboys, to be real contenders as the season went on. Yeah, maybe you lose a game here or there at the start, but to be 0-4, nobody would have had that on their bingo cards or anything like that. So that's really the kind of surprise, the level of shock we have if one of these two teams, or I guess both of these two teams, could lose. So what would it mean for their season, right? We look at their opponents that they're going up against, and that adds a little bit more insult to injury, right? Because you look at this week coming up, the Giants and the Carolina Panthers. I'm pretty sure I deemed these two teams the worst two teams in the NFL a couple of weeks ago, right? And now both of them are coming off of their first win last week. The Panthers looking like a brand new team, like they just got rid of everybody else in the first 2 weeks and brought in a couple new guys in week 3 to demolish the Las Vegas Raiders. They beat them and put up 36 points. Andy Dalton obviously came in for the benched Bryce Young, and they just look completely different, right? And regardless of what that means for the Panthers, you can't, hide the fact that they look pretty good on offense overall. They punted a couple times, right, but putting up 36 points. If they would have played the Bengals this past week, they would have beat them by 3 points. So now heading into this matchup, Andy Dalton facing his old team in the Bengals, and the Bengals still obviously looking for a win now, kind of getting into more desperation mode. it's not a scenario where I should be feeling this insecure about whether or not the Bengals have enough or can do enough, have enough on defense, I should specify, to beat the Carolina Panthers, right? It's not a thought that would have ever crossed anybody's mind in the offseason or any point this season, honestly. So that's one matchup. And then obviously we just finished talking about the Giants and the Cowboys with what the Giants went through in the offseason, getting rid of their best player. The discourse there was with Daniel Jones and getting that contract to him. The Hard Knocks episodes of John Mara being distraught over getting rid of Saquon, how they came to the decision, the conversations that were had as well. It was all very revealing, and the Giants got clowned for getting rid of Saquon, obviously, and then in the first game he scores like 3 touchdowns, and they just look like just fools, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, for making that decision. But now they've come out of that. They won a game in very impressive fashion, like I said, against the Browns, and their defense looks to be pretty solid. They're capable of making some stops, and you look at the Giants as well, and that's why I highlighted Devin Singletary, because he's been playing pretty decently. To try and fill the shoes of Saquon, that's almost as hard of a task, as impossible of a task that there is for just any running back. But he hasn't been doing that bad. And also their offensive line has been doing pretty solid, over the past couple of weeks. So it's not like these two teams are just getting blown out each week and that they're both 0-3, right? The Panthers and the Giants are coming off a very good week. So I shouldn't feel as unsure about whether the Cowboys can go beat the Giants or whether or not the Bengals can go and beat the Panthers. But that's where we are. Must-win territory now, I think, for both of these teams. I don't think that's really a question for all the reasons that I laid out. And even saying that now, it's not what you'd associate with elite contending level teams, right? We talked about the Bengals being in a great spot, mainly because Joe Burrow was coming back, and also you were able to keep T. Higgins, franchise tag him for one more year. Everything was going to be put into this basket to go and try and really compete this year. And then now, to have a must-win game in Week 4, it's unprecedented. It's completely unexpected. So that's what they're dealing with. And then same thing for the Cowboys, right? The whole thing about the Cowboys is trying to get into the playoffs and performing well in the playoffs, right? It's almost taken for granted that you have to get there, obviously. And now with the lack of additions that they brought in and how just inactive they were to try and really reinforce this team with all the glaring needs that they obviously needed, to be 1-2 right now and be in a must-win situation right now, it would be such a new low for the Cowboys at this point to find themselves in a position to barely make the playoffs or not even make the playoffs at all. And that's why I think a loss this week for the Cowboys would just mean a little bit more for them than it would for the Bengals, right? I think it would be worse for them because I feel like it would completely destroy everything that they have kind of building up, right? They have Mike McCarthy on the last year of his deal. Do you go to 1-3 and then potentially think about maybe getting rid of him at some point if you start 1-3? The locker room already seems to be not the most sturdy, to say, at this point, with people making comments here or there, talking to the media, not really being the most filtered when speaking to the media. It feels like another loss, like they've had the last 2 weeks, could really crumble that entire thing. Like I said before, they would have the worst record in the division, something that you would have never guessed going back to last year. Also, everyone is questioning Dak and the contracts that they got to CeeDee and Dak Prescott, obviously. So, what does that say about that decision, right? If you go 1-3 and made it such a big deal, obviously it was a big deal to re-sign these two guys, but to re-sign your two best players and to now be somehow worse would say a lot, and you'd have a lot of second guessing about those decisions, more so than there is now, right? For waiting so long to extend Dak to the highest paid contract for quarterbacks, CeeDee Lamb, basically the same thing for wide receivers. You'd have some now more explorative questions about, maybe you decide to trade one of them now because you you need something back. You can't just stick with doing the same thing each and every week. That's the level of what we're talking about now. Because for the Bengals, if they were to lose, it's sort of the similar thing, right? You go to 0-4, there's finger pointing in that locker room. Maybe Zach Taylor's on the hot seat from that point on. The division that they're in, the AFC North, I don't think starting 0-4, you'd be in a position to win the division and then much less make the playoffs. So similarly with them, do they start exploring the ideas of trading maybe T. Higgins or Jamar Chase? I heard that be thrown out this morning on ESPN, I'm pretty sure. So for me, they have similar, consequences to losing. And I just feel like Dallas definitely has more to lose because of the fact that it would certainly be such a new low to go, what is it now, like almost 28, 30 years or something like that, around there, without getting to a conference championship, but now you don't even make the playoffs, and you have a lot of money going to CeeDee and Dak, and your head coach is on the last year of his deal. It's hard to think that this situation would get any worse than it would be when the Cowboys would be 1-3. And then going forward, if they can't beat the Giants, I think they play the Steelers the following week, then the Lions, then the 49ers, and then at that point, how many of those games do you think they're going to win? It would look a lot worse for the Cowboys to be 0-1 in the division and then playing those next teams right after that. I think a loss would hurt them a lot more than it would for the Cincinnati Bengals for the reasons that I just said. Their schedule is also a little bit easier, so they might not make the playoffs, but it's not like it would look so gloomy for them going forward as well. So that's why I was so interested with these matchups, right? It looks like gimme matchups, right? But you just don't know. You don't know because the Bengals were plays away from being at least 2-1 or 3-0, you could argue. But that's the nature of the game, right? Pass interference calls, your defense not being good enough to stop anybody, it seems. That's what makes it so entertaining, but also why, the NFL is so competitive, so unexpected. They need to win these games, must-win games for both of them. We'll see if both of them get it. Who would get it? I think they're both likely to win, I'll say that. But again, I wouldn't be too surprised if somehow they both lost. But that is something I was thinking about when looking over the games this upcoming week. And talking about the games this upcoming week, we're going to get into part 1 of my official NFL Week 4 game picks this week, a weekly segment that we do on here, going through all the matchups and determining who the winner will be. We talked about a few of them just in this segment. We're going to get into a couple more in a couple of seconds. Don't go anywhere.
Looking